Welcome. In this video, I'm going to have a little deeper look into the symbolism of the Buddha story. Obviously, all stories are there to give us inspiration and messages, and even those that are more historical, religious stories and such, which come from the basis of, in principle, being a story of events that happened in history. So whether or not it's symbolic or partially historical, accurate events, I mean, it's not what really matters to us at this point. What really matters is that we're able to look underneath the surface and understand what the deeper symbols are in teaching stories, tales from all different traditions, religious, cultural traditions from all around the world. So let's have a little deeper dive into the Buddha story. So the part of the Buddha story that I want to focus on in this video here is the part that talks about the 4 sights. So before we talk about the 4 sights, we'll just quickly remind ourselves for people who don't know exactly the story, but the Buddha was the son of one of the kings of the area of northern India of the day. And the Buddha grew up within the walls of the palace grounds, assuming that these were pretty vast grounds because, you know, he did a lot of stuff. They went hunting, they did sports events and So we're talking about a pretty wide area, but he grew up within the walled sort of boundaries of the palace. And the idea of the king, Sidhartha, was that he didn't want to expose the Buddha to suffering, to all the reality, the harsher realities of life in the world. Exactly why that comes from another part of the teaching, which maybe I'll look at another time, but today I want to really focus on the 4 sights. So we'll stay with what's relevant here. So And in some sense, you know, any parent, we kind of want to protect our children from the harsher realities of life, particularly as they're growing up and what have you. But what I actually believe we're looking at in terms of the symbols of the story is that the palace grounds and with the king as the, you know, center point. The king is. This is something that I've also connected to in biblical stories. Like, the king is the consciousness of the day, i.e., what is the mind of consciousness in this moment now? And so the king is the placeholder, if you like. And the placeholder there is saying, I don't want Sidhartha. And Sidhartha in this place is pure consciousness, our Buddha nature, our inner true self, if we want to call it that. And we don't want this consciousness to come into contact with the harsh realities of life. Or more importantly, I mean, so most of us, most of the time, are getting caught up in mental streams, ego mind. And it is these constant streams of egoic mentation, egoic thoughts that run round around our heads that keep us from the reality of the world that is all about us. We're not always very focused on what's coming into our 6 sense doors, what we're feeling within our body, in our emotions, what thoughts we're having. Do we ever have any distance to notice, oh, I'm thinking about that again. That's turning around in my mind. Yet again, quite often is the case. So distance from our thoughts and stuff. So when we're caught up in this, and you know, life is a soap opera. You know, life is one great big distraction. You know, the ego mind wants to be the center stage. It's always providing us with soap opera information, whether that's like watching films, thinking about food, thinking about sort of survival basics of life, of bringing in money, whatever, whether it's being sucked into the football and the scores and the results of this sport or that sport, or literally soap operas that we're obsessed with, that are on the TVs and the films, and you know, getting the next best car and this improvement on the house. And we're constantly bombarded by this grasping nature of mind that's always going after the next thing, and that next thing is also always the thing that will bring a certain amount of satisfaction and happiness to the system. So this is living life within the palace walls, to be constantly in this space of striving after whatever it is that the mind, so the king, tells us is going to make us happy. The king produced for Sidhartha all the most beautiful women, all the most beautiful foods, the most beautiful settings. He went off and he did pleasure activities, he went hunting, he did sports. Everything was idyllic, and it was always what the king thought would make the prince happy and keep him away from really to know what the realities of life were about. But all of these things ultimately lacked something, lacked a certain amount of meaning, lacked satisfaction, true genuine satisfaction for the young prince, to the point where one day he gets his charioteer Chana and he says to him, "Take me out of the palace." So what's going on here? This is where at some point we see that we're caught up in mental egoic streams of consciousness, and at some point we say stop. And as a practitioner, someone who's taking those steps, first steps on the spiritual path, at some point we just need to say stop. What else is there out there other than this? And this is Sidhartha saying to his charioteer, "Come, you're taking me out of the palace." And obviously it's scary to go out of the palace, because the palace is everything that we've known. The palace is everything that is safe, comfortable, comforting. And going out of the palace means going into an unknown space, unknown realm, unknown field. But that's the courage that every practitioner on the spiritual path at some point needs to take. So Sidhartha asks Chana. Interesting, I had a little look to see if I could find the Pali root of the word Chana, and quick check. So possible translations are secret or concealed, hidden sort of thing. So for me that ties in nice to say that, you know, Chana is the charioteer. He's the one who's going to take him out, and he's almost the one who's going to break that seal, that secret seal of confidentiality, that's this mystic web that's around the palace, and Chana is the one who's going to break that, or Sidhartha calls him to say, "You are the one. This is time to break through the veil, the hidden secrets of what life is all about. Take me through the veil." So obviously Buddhism comes from Hinduism. The base of Buddhism was built on the Hindu tradition, culture of the time in India. And obviously, for people who know anything about Hindu culture, the Bhagavad Gita, we've already had this symbolism of the charioteer and the person riding in the chariot. In the Bhagavad Gita, it was Arjuna, who was the charioteer, and he had Krishna in the back of the chariot. And this takes place, without going too much into the Bhagavad Gita, because we don't want to go there, and I'm not very knowledgeable on it either, but it takes place on the battlefield between the two big armies who are waiting to face off with battle, and Arjuna has doubts, and the dialogue becomes between Krishna and Arjuna, who eventually convinces Arjuna to take action. But the chariot is also given the idea that the horses are like the sense doors, so everything we experience coming through the sense doors. The chariot is possibly the symbolic of the body. The rider in the chariot would be consciousness, self, true self, Buddha nature, however we want to interpret that. And then the driver of the chariot is possibly, for me, more that inquiring mind, that desire to go beyond, that the questioning, investigative mind that we need to have to launch ourselves into spiritual experiences. So, and in some way it's switched, because Arjuna is the character, with Krishna being the higher self, and it's Krishna being carried in the chariot, higher self, with Arjuna with the questions and what have you. Inquisitive mind, wanting to explore the sense realm, wanting to explore the body, the sense realm, go out into that, as opposed, and getting out of ego mind streams. Whereas in the Buddha story, Sidhartha is in the chariot, but he is the Buddha to be, and he is being driven by Arjuna, so at Siddhartha's command. So it's a slight inversion, but Sidhartha is that Buddha nature who wants to know more, existential angst, and Chana is the inquisitive one, who's going to take us through the veil. So this symbolism is the same. The chariot goes out through the palace walls. We go out of the palace walls of the ego mind, and we go into the chariot, which is our body, our emotional body, the 6 sense doors, and also a sense of awareness of our mind. So what happens when the Buddha goes beyond the walls? So he sees the 4 sights, which is the key element of which I want to speak about today. What are the 4 sights? The first thing that he sees an old man. So someone, he hadn't even seen this within the palace walls, aging old men. Then he sees a sick and dying man. And in the 3rd sight, he sees the dead man, the dead body. And in the 4th sight, he sees the sadhu, the shramana, the renunciate, the one who's walked away from mainstream life, renounced, and become the spiritual ascetic, the wanderer. Now what I'm going to propose here, it's a slight shift on maybe more traditional interpretations, but the Buddha is at a stage in his practice where he's just going out to discover what it is to be outside of ego mind streams. And so what the Buddha at this stage, I mean, one of the key teachings of the Buddha is he talks about breaking the cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death. But when he goes out on the 3 sights, he doesn't see birth, but what he saw was aging, sickness, and death. He saw that part of the cycle. When we're talking about what is the Buddha talking about when he talks later on about breaking the cycle of birth, aging, sickness and death. So every birth, when we're talking about on a moment-to-moment basis, we're talking about the birth of new egoic thought streams. So as we're sitting here, it's the next line of distraction. Okay, what do I need to do for dinner tonight? Weren't Liverpool playing last night? And I must go and check the score. Whatever it is that keeps us in this hold of distractive thought streams, whatever our personal soap operas are, each time we get caught up into one of them, it's a new birth. And all of those birth cycles, this new mind cycle that comes, just like in the Buddhist teaching that the last mind of this life is the first mind of the next life. So if I allow myself to go all the way through this cycle thinking about the football scores of last night and who's going to play in the team tomorrow and what have you and so forth, and then that slowly, goes full cycle, dies out, and then another cycle comes in about what I need to do for dinner. Do I need to go shopping to buy this ingredient or that, or wouldn't it be nice to connect to such and such who I haven't spoken to for such a long time, and this and that, and the cycles go on, but the energy's there, and because it hasn't been broken, the next time that cycle of thinking about football, thinking about like food, thinking about this person or that person, or however the beautiful car that I would like to buy, or this or that that's going to make me happy, or this that's making me unhappy, cravings, aversion cycles. So whatever keeps me on this loop of cycles of cravings and aversion, then if we've not broken into them and started to take distance, like being able to observe these cycles, then they still have that power. It's almost like they every time they come back, they almost like strengthen themselves, so they've got more power to come back. But the more that we're able to break those cycles and be self-aware of those and have a bit of distance between our sense of self and those mental cycles, then that disempowers them. And this is Sidhartha in the chariot, being led by his sense doors, being aware of the body, the emotions and the mind as he goes out beyond the palace, beyond ego mental streams. So there we talked about how that starts the birth cycle, but the Buddha was only at the start of his spiritual quest, so he wasn't able to see the birth, the arising of the thought bubbles, but he then was able to see, okay, I'm caught in a mental tract. And then once he saw that he was caught in a mental tract, then that's when things start to age and die back. So for the first time, he sees aging and death. He sees that these mental cycles have a certain emptiness to them. They're things that we repeat, that we get caught in a stream, thinking about the same things again and again. Repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And he started to see that process. Aging, sickness, death. And that's the sights, that's what he saw. And when they disappeared, that's when we come back and we get a glimpse at that space of true self, Buddha nature, and that's the sight of the Sramana. The Sramana is the sight that we glimpse as a spiritual practitioner from time to time of true self, inner peace, inner balance, clarity, Buddha nature, non-judging mind, awake, alive, attentive. Because let's face it, on the surface of things, even if the Buddha saw a Sramana, a sadhu, walking across the street after he'd seen the other sights, it's another guy. He might be younger, but intellectually he knows that this guy as well is going to get sick and he's going to die, right? So what's the significance of this fourth sight? He saw someone who looked at peace in the world, maybe. But so what? He's going to look at peace, but he's still going to get sick. He's going to get old and die. This is not what the symbolism is telling us in this story. The symbolism tells us that he got a sight of true self, observer consciousness. And when he saw that, and he saw that that was free from the machinations of the ego mind, then he saw that that's the path to take. That's what I want to become. I want to be able to be in that space, free from egoic mental streams. And that's what any spiritual practitioner sees, and that's where the inspiration is to say, right now I'm ready to shave off my hair, because that is something that is really worth going after in my life. That is radical change of how it is to be in the world. So it's when the Buddha saw that space within himself, not externally. None of these are external figures. The aging, sickness and death are of his own egoic mental streams, and the Sramana of his own inner true self. And that's what motivated him to leave the palace and go and seek a life as a sadhu, Sramana himself, and to try to manifest this. And then if we understand what the Buddha is the fully awakened one, and so the sense of that is that the Buddha did arrive at a stage where he was able to realize that space of awakened mind, awakened from the egoic streams of mind on a 24/7 basis. And then as a practitioner on the path, we put that up as the goal of which something that we can aspire towards as we work with our own internal mental conditioning. And so the Buddha went out from the palace, you see, and he lived close to nature. He lived in the forests. He shaved his hair. He let go of the luxurious life. And this is also what it means, like, as we step outside of mind and as we get in touch with our true inner selves, then we do move closer to nature naturally, because the natural world and the true self has a different vibration, whereas the egoic mind has I don't like to use the word lower vibration, but a less harmonious. The vibration of the egoic mind is not attuned and in harmony with the natural world that is all around us, whereas the harmony and vibration of our true inner selves is. So may we all find our way out of the walled cities that we live in our ego minds. May we all connect to our true inner nature, our true self, to the observer consciousness, to the awakened inner nature. And from there, may we all choose to grow more and more into that aspect of self, of who we are, and work through all our cravings and aversions and the trappings of our egoic mindsets. Thanks for watching.